happy if I don't need to talk.
Hello and welcome to And It's Live, the history of the Premier League. It is the summer of 2001, the post-Cold War boom period of comfort and security is still with us for a couple of months anyway. What we're discussing today, well, it's part one, it's transfers, and quite an interesting summer, 2001. Some things that didn't quite work out and some things that absolutely did. Joining me as always are my two good friends, David Edgar and Adam Thornton. David, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Martin. It's lovely to be here. At the time of recording, we're just gearing up for the return of the EPL. We are in the height of summer transfer silly season, and it's nice to look back to a time when it was all a little calmer and nobody was wearing a yellow tie on television.
Indeed. Adam, how are we doing?
Yeah, echo David's sentiments. I like the summer before the real football starts. It's a time for optimism and a time to see clubs make hopefully sensible transfers that take them on to the next level. So yeah, this is my favourite one of the four.
Yeah, it is always interesting, this kind of mad bit of business. Let's start with the champions, who were quiet last season, gents. They weren't supposed to be, of course. The Ruud van Nistelrooy thing didn't happen, but other clubs with maybe other players could have reenacted the Homer Simpson back into the hedge kind of gift, Davey, and said, "No, did we really sign that? Because your knee is pretty fucked, and you might not actually be able to do anything." They kept their word. They honoured, I guess, whatever principle they had and followed through. It would be worth their while doing so. So that was good to see. That was exciting to see. That is a big deal for them. Another couple of bits and pieces this summer, though. Let's start at the back before I go to Adam in the midfield, which is the more interesting one. Ferguson, in later years, said he only regretted one transfer or one sale that he made, and that was Jaap Stam. But he felt it was something like £50 million, and this was a wee bit later in what we would come to know the window was kind of late August. Lazio offered £50 million for Jaap Stam, and he felt that's just too much money for a centre half. Like, you just couldn't possibly say no to that. They brought in some experience, but maybe experience being the real word there in Laurent Blanc, and they were, I think, going to find out just how much of a presence Jaap Stam was in their recent success.
From a purely business point of view, it is a good deal. You do understand that. It was a lot of money, and he was no spring chicken, Jaap Stam. So it wasn't a case of, here is a guy who could be at the heart of our defence for a number of years. But he was such a presence. And I think most people were surprised at the time, because I think that even if you were not a Manchester United fan, he was impressive. He was impressive in the way he played, in his demeanour, in what he brought to the side in obvious terms of leadership. And you just didn't really think of Manchester United needing to take a bid. That's the thing. It wasn't like you're thinking, well, that's their place in the football hierarchy. So, I mean, it was a conscious decision on his part to let him leave. You mentioned, of course, about replacements, and Laurent Blanc being one. Ferguson had tried for Laurent Blanc for a number of years. He loved him. And no wonder, by the way. See, in the 90s, Laurent Blanc was a superb central defender. Absolutely wonderful. So, signing Laurent Blanc, but Ferguson did this. He had ideas in his head about players. And once he had that, he didn't really let the passage of time affect it.
Good and bad.
Yeah, good. Well, I mean, the infamous case at Manchester United is Ralph Milne, isn't it? Who's famously been called, one of United's worst ever players. Ralph Milne, as strange as it may seem to people who didn't know his career, when Ferguson was at Aberdeen and Dundee United, and they were challenging and winning titles, they were called the new firm because they looked set for a period of dominance. And Ralph Milne was a superb player for Dundee United, not merely domestically, but in the European arena as well. Dundee United reached a European Cup final. They reached a UEFA Cup final, a European Cup semi-final. They reached a UEFA Cup final. And by all means, he was a really good player, but this is maybe 5 years after his peak. This is the case with Laurent Blanc, who was old when United signed him. He was in his mid-30s, and he just wasn't what he had been. But Ferguson had coveted him for a long time, and if Ferguson coveted you and got an opportunity to sign you, he tended to do it. He tended to do that. I think we've all seen this with managers. I mean, as fans, we tend to do it, but we're not the pros. We're not paid for it. Where someone signs a player and they'll say, "Oh, he showed great form at this particular club," and it was 3-4 years ago, and you're thinking it's the same body, but is it the same player that you're signing? You're not signing that guy. You're signing this version of him. It felt like a downgrade, and it soon became clear that it was. Now, of course, we know that the following year, Manchester United are going to sign Rio Ferdinand and thus, complete or rather cover up a lot of these deficiencies. But yeah, I was surprised as an outsider at the time that Ferguson let Stam go, because he was so impressive, Stam. Yeah. And he was a wonderful amalgam of a British centre-half and a Dutch footballer. But it wasn't just that, it was the intangibles. He is one of those guys you look at and think, I wish we had a player like him in our team. And the fact that Ferguson regretted it later, I do have some sympathy though, Martin, because from a business point of view, it was...
And still, Davey, you're in an era where centre-halves just don't
go for that.
You do not pay that kind of money for centre-back. And, Barthez and Blanc 3 years ago, that was a hell of a lot different than it does now. Adam, the biggest transfer of United, some of the biggest transfer of the summer, was a player who, 3 years before this, once flipped me the bird after I called him a cheating baldy bastard. Life would come at me fast after that particular incident. Of course, was Juan Sebastián Verón. Wonderful player. Really excited to see this, but also curious, and I'm very interested in your thoughts on this. We will look at his contribution to Manchester United over the spell. Broadly seen as something that didn't quite work out. Was he ever going to be suited to the pace of English football, the lack of maybe mixed midfield flexibility that was still very much ingrained in English football? That two that Ferguson had kind of used fairly consistently, maybe wasn't to his liking. Not really space for a diamond. I don't know what were your thoughts on the signing and the sense of it all, the theory at least.
Theory is sound for sure. Difficult not to get caught up in hindsight, because I do think players of that quality should be able to adapt. However, I think this is obviously Ferguson trying to become more modern, European, whatever you want to call it. With
he has this in his mind, Adam, right? That midfield is just something we're not getting right. It's too harem scarum control.
And he never changes. You go to the end of the decade and the Barcelona finals, and it never changes. But it's this thing, and I'm not absolutely not denigrating Alex Ferguson, but it's this thing. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean that you can do it. As a club in general, like, you can't just, Wimbledon, for example, turning around and saying I'm gonna employ a passing manager and just that these things can happen. If your culture has been built on, or your footballing philosophy has been built on what it's been built on, it takes a lot to just say, well, we're just going to put Verón in there and it will happen. Particularly when it's maybe that type of personality as well. So I've got a little bit of sympathy because he's trying it. You've got Van Nistelrooy coming in. He's going to try and adapt more into a sort of European style to hopefully get a bit more success, or get more success, I should say, in in Europe. So I can sort of understand it. I just think it's the building blocks thing. You're not giving Verón the support defensively. He's also not really the type of player that, as you mentioned there, that British fans are going to get accustomed to quickly, because he is a bit slow, a bit more cultured than they're used to. It is still quite hate him, scare him. Man United's strength, as we said before, had been that central midfield. They have got Paul Scholes in there. Paul Scholes is industrious, I think, as well as being a really good passer and really good creative. He gets about the pitch, he does all these things. So there's an element of it in hindsight. I'm thinking, did they actually need him? Because they could have spent that money in other places, and they could have got better at some of the areas that Ferguson teams are more suited to, if that makes sense. It's like rather than coming and putting in a fancy new jigsaw piece and figuring out how all the other pieces adapt to it, we could have just improved on some of the pieces that we've got and made things a bit more. They could have got maybe more of an attacking fullback in, or maybe another option wide. All these type of things that you think about in hindsight. But I think in terms of the theory, bringing in a player like that to help you become more modern, more continental, control games more, I think the logic of it is sound. That just, as we've seen many, many times before, wanting to do something and having that thing happen doesn't always work.
Team game, one player alone won't do it. But David, given how comfortable United have been now, 3 seasons in a row, certainly how comfortable they were the season before this one, how many goals they were scoring. So okay, you miss Jaap Stam, but Teddy Sheringham's gone, player of the year, but old, and they've got the hottest thing to be coming out of Europe at the moment. Yep, question marks over how he's going to recover from injury and all the rest of it. But it just seems set up. United huge favourites for this title, surely.
Of course, 3 champions are deserve, and they ran away with these titles. These were not close. These were not, to use a word from earlier, scare 'em titles. These were not last day deciders. United.
First one was the treble one.
Yeah,
but 2000, 2001, they were very, very, very strong.
They were very and the word that last week, as we were doing the show, that sprung to mind was effortless. That's what it was looking like. They were looking like they were just so good and so ahead. But managers are human beings, and human beings develop thoughts in their mind and obsessions. And when you are an all-powerful manager at a club, and you've proven yourself many times over, you can do what you like. And I think a recent example would be Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. And Ferguson began to develop this thing about Europe, about tactical naivety. He wanted to have an evolution. He didn't want to run this particular road till they got to the end and then have to change direction. And that is admirable. Whether he quite, I think, understood the cut, because there was resistance from United. Remember the chants, attack, 4-4-2, 4-4-2. There was cultural resistance to it. And it is difficult, even for the most beloved of managers. I mean, I remember, aren't you will as well, you're too young, Adam, our club Rangers, Graham Souness, who was beloved, bringing in guys like Ray Wilkins and saying, this is how we're going to play. And Scottish football back then was a lot more rudimentary. Hasn't evolved much since. But the crowd at Ibrox who adored Graham Souness, get it in the box, get it, we don't want to see this stuff. So you're going up against a lot to do that. Cards on the table, when we come to Verón, I thought he was a wonderful player. I watched him in Italy and I absolutely adored him. But maybe context is important, that I'm tuning in to see a certain type of match at United. Ferguson, though, at this point, I think, Martin, is now primarily concerned with Champions League. I think that he feels that
big time.
United know their way around the Premier League, and deservedly so.
And this season's Champions League, this
Glasgow.
summer, in the Sunday Mail, Scottish tabloids, Sunday newspaper, sister paper of the Daily Record, a big piece on destiny and Ferguson's destiny. And of course, we'll get into it over the course of the season. He will tell us that he's retiring at the end of this season. If this Champions League final was anywhere else, I'm just not convinced it works like that. It's at Hampden, the place where he first saw the great Real Madrid in that 1960 final and against Eintracht Frankfurt and 14-8 or whatever the score was back in jumpers for goalpost kind of days. But he was absolutely captivated by it. And this is where it's going to end. And my goodness, it gets very close to literally being that final United against Real Madrid.
Yeah, but
everything is going towards this particular outcome, and how people buy into fate and destiny, how that can propel, but it sometimes can be just too much. Oh, it's too seductive, right?
As a non-Manchester United fan, I bought into this because there are certain people within football who, to use a cliche, write their own scripts and do have the ability to make these things happen and do have the ability to somehow just get to where you want them to go. He's also a very pragmatic man. He's also at this point, because you mentioned there, he's thinking about retiring. So he's thinking about legacy. He's not, the legacy's not going to be much boosted by another league title at this time. I do think that these league titles in the second half of this decade are very impressive because English football changes with the arrival of Chelsea, etc. So right now, though, he knows a second Champions League, though, well, that's a different matter. I get that, and I'm one of the greats. And a league title maybe doesn't quite deliver that. But what I will give Ferguson credit for here, Martin, is he had seen, at this point, be easy to ignore it, he had seen where the game was going to go. He had seen it several years before it did. And, I mean, he couldn't build a team to beat Pep's Barcelona when it came about, but he built a bloody good one that could beat everybody else because he saw where it was going and he adapted towards that. It would have been really easy to sit and go, this is working, it's going to keep going until it doesn't work. He didn't do that. There's a bravery there, and I think that's one of the things that Ferguson's greatness, because he was the same at Aberdeen, he was the same when he went at United, the restlessness and the foresight to do these things. They didn't happen by accident. The class of 92 didn't happen by accident. It happened because he said, we have no youth system here. And he went around every school in the northwest of England looking for youngsters, setting things up. So, yeah, as Adam said, just because you know something doesn't necessarily mean you have the answer to fixing it. But I do give him points for trying.
Indeed. Arsenal, quite summer. For them, and again, their big signing, Adam, didn't cost a penny, but it created waves. We know, of course, players crossing a divide, we know that very well. Directly crossing the divide feels very, very different. More accustomed in Spain by this time. And is Figo gone to Real Madrid? I think he has. Summer of 2000, that would have been, wouldn't it? So, spare me all the chat about the Classico and how vicious a rivalry that is if you're prepared to sell players like that. But Sol Campbell going from Spurs to Arsenal, exactly what Arsenal needed, Adam. We're going to talk about a few players over the course, I think, of this series who I think are maligned because of their media presence post-retirement. Sol Campbell's one of those. He's just a strange man, and he says strange things, but he was a colossus of a defender, physical, could read a game well, had recovery pace, good on the ball. He's everything you need, and certainly what Arsenal need. We talked about how porous they were, and it's going to be a gamble that worked big time.
Isn't it funny how, like, this, I don't know, would this happen nowadays? It's funny, everyone says this is all sanitized, that football's all sanitized now, and it's all nicey and that. Would you get a free transfer going between rivals now? I don't know if you would.
You can do nothing about it. Spurs couldn't do anything about it. Free transfers exactly that. It's they're absolutely they're hamstrung, and I think that was again part of the real fury in the support, wasn't it? That you could have gone anywhere, you could have made your money anywhere. You can't go to them, but he's getting medals at the end of it.
I just don't
There's
think
certain clubs that you can do it with, Adam. There's certain clubs. I don't think still you could do it from Liverpool to Manchester United and vice versa. I still don't think that's possible. But you can do it from Liverpool to Everton and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think you could, Arsenal to Chelsea is a well-worn route for signings as well.
Yeah.
But I still don't think you could do Arsenal to Tottenham unless you're a very, very brave individual like Sol Campbell was, and you go, I don't care. I don't think it would reach the fever pitch of, Maurice Johnson signing for Rangers, but I think that it would definitely, there are some clubs that you just can't. And as I say, what is it now? 1963, the last direct transfer between Liverpool and Manchester United.
Yeah. I mean, I'll come back to you in a minute, Adam, about the football and value that he provided to Wenger in a minute. Nothing touches Johnson. It's just not on a different planet. People who aren't plugged into this mad world that we inhabit have no idea. But of the Premier League era, I don't think there's anything. No. Tevez to City, maybe.
That's in eras. But this was enormous because it was a free transfer as well.
That's what I was going to say.
Right? Yeah. That hurt because he was worth a lot. It was this certain knowledge as well with Tottenham fans. There's nothing worse than someone making you feel bad about something you feel bad about but are trying to deny. And in this case, Sol Campbell saying, I want to win things, I'm going to Arsenal to win things, is a huge slap in the face to Tottenham fans, because what he's saying is, forget your rivalry, they're bigger than you, they're better than you, and they're going to be more successful than you. And from someone you've adored, that's quite painful. I think it's akin, honestly, when you lose a football player, it's like a minor version of a partner leaving you for someone better. When a beloved player heads out the door, the rejection stings. It's like, why don't you love me as much as I love you? To then go off with someone you hate, I imagine just compounds that. But Tevez is a good shout. But even then, he was problematic and there had been issues. With Campbell, they adored him at Tottenham, rightly so. And of all the clubs in the world to go to, and not only that, Martin, he goes there and he's very good. That's the problem as well. If he goes there and he flops, I don't think there's a bitterness. He goes there and he's brilliant and he wins things.
Cantona to United from Leeds is maybe another undervalued one. Adam, back to that Wenger thing though.
Yeah,
because this is him building a defence for the first time, right? He inherited that thing. He built on it first double. Now he's actually having to build his own thing.
Yeah, I think just on that I think there's a difference. I think going on a free transfer than Tevez, for example, who was on loan at Manchester United, and they were not in charge. They're not agreeing to sell him to Man City. So I think there's obviously different nuances there. I just don't think it gets to this point, is what I was going to say, in modern football. Other than Real Madrid, it doesn't really get to a point now. Clubs don't allow it. For them to run down their contract and go somewhere else. I off the top of my head, I can't remember the last Bosman or free transfer between big clubs where in England where the selling club or the club he's at just now actively really want him to stay and he goes on a free transfer. I don't really know if there are any in that respect. I'm probably missing a few. Transfer fees I think are different. FPP we've seen obviously with someone like Cole Palmer or whatever, where they probably didn't want to lose him but he's went. All these new modern things, I think just a straight, I am going on a Bosman, best player in the league, best player on the team, I'm going on a free transfer to our greatest rivals or even one of our rivals. I just don't think it happens very much anymore. And maybe that's more clubs have got wiser to Bosman because we are only 5 or 6 years into it now. They've got wiser to free transfers. They don't allow it. They offer that +1 contract and everything that sort of mitigates all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's very of its time, I think, in that respect. And I don't think there's a lot of examples, but it's far and away the biggest of them for sure. On Campbell himself, yeah, I agree with your assessment. I think I don't really put too much stock in what they say post playing career, to be honest. I'm okay at splitting the two out, but I understand that type of thing does make people think a little bit differently of them. I really liked him. I thought he was a very, very sensible signing at the time. I'd have probably paid big money for him if I was Arsenal, because as you said there, it is something that they need, as well as Giovanni Van Bronckhorst coming in as well. Those are things that they need. I don't think you'd find many people in the summer of 2001 who looked at Man United's business and Arsenal's business and thought that Arsenal's was tremendously better, or oh wow, that is going to be the cherry on the cake for us going and rampaging through this title. I think me certainly, look, as much as I've said about the Man United thing in hindsight, that's what a big club should do. They should go and they should identify 2-3 players that we want to take us to the next level. Whether those players do take you to the next level is kind of irrelevant at that point. That's what you should do. So Man United's logic was sound. Arsenal's is probably a level down from that, if I'm honest, maybe even a couple of levels down from that, given some of the other signings that they bring in. But the two players, Campbell and Van Bronckhorst, fill a need in the team. So to your point, it's a team game. 2 very, very good players who can come in, can hit the ground running, can contribute to the team, can help to rebuild that defence. And it's a big, big part of the success. So yeah, I think it was a very brave signing from everyone involved. And it ended up being a really, really good signing for Arsenal.
He who dares wins, Rodney. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst getting over that injury. He'd been nursing for much of season 2000-2001. David, the other one, just before we go to break, again, kind of made sense on paper. We've hinted at it before, was Franny Jeffers going to Arsenal. The Fox in the box. Young still, and I think you've mentioned Everton had to sell. Maybe he was not. There's no maybe about it actually. In retrospect, he wasn't ready for that kind of jump. Even that move to London, just wasn't maybe mature enough to really tackle that kind of head on. But another one that people said, this gives Arsenal something a bit different. Maybe fills that Ian Wright hole that they maybe haven't really used or been able to fill in terms of like for like. They're all good runners. Anelka's been and gone, but Sylvain Viltord, for example, Henry, obviously this is something a bit different, right?
Yep, definitely. Even at the time it looked a lot of money. I think we're kind of more used now to potential, aren't we? Being charged more for potential. I think we're all a little more used to that now in the era of widespread data use and projection modelling and that sort of thing. And of course the market has gone up. But I think 10 million seemed a lot for a guy with his record, and B, seemed a lot for a club who were desperate to sell. You would have thought they could have shaved a bit off that. Look, I don't think Spurs would have paid. I don't think Daniel Levy would have left that negotiating room agreeing to pay 10 million. As somebody who had a soft spot for Everton, I'd seen a lot of him. I thought he was good. I didn't think he was 10 million. And again, I thought he had potential. One of the issues with Jeffers is that you absolutely had to make chances for him. But that he was your penalty box striker, fox in the box. But this is not. I mean, I've held my hands up on this show many times to thinking certain players would be brilliant. I remain in hope that Alan Boksic will turn out to be a game changer for Middlesbrough even at this late stage. But this one at the time, I didn't feel right, and that's obviously not a good thing to go in with transfers. But there are some signings you just see even now, and you go, "Yeah, I like that. That's good. That fits." This didn't for me at all, and. Delighted that Everton got the money at the time, but I didn't think, wow, that's Everton's season completely derailed, which probably tells you something about a player going like that. But against that, if anyone could make it work, Arsene Wenger had a great record, at the time. We all thought of him as this professor of football. He'd brought through young strikers and given them another level.
He's in good hands for his development, right?
He's in great hands, and, it's a big club, it's a stable club, but maybe that's the telling word there. Big. It was much bigger than he was used to. It's a bigger city. It's a frightening city if you're not used to it, especially if you come from a city. I know this is someone who went from Glasgow to London, for example, and thought of myself as a city boy and experienced and all that. And you get to London, and one of the first things I remember is getting off the train at Euston and getting in a taxi to go to the place I was working. And we drove for about 30 minutes, and it was quite clear we were still in the city centre. Now, you drive for 30 minutes through Glasgow city centre, you've changed counties in that time. So the overwhelming scale And of course, Highbury at this point, Martin, with the marble and, you know, the history and everything, it is a lot to take in. And when you have a £10 million price tag, the managers can talk about development and it's for the future. If a price tag is such that fans are going, right, wow, this is really going to change us, that's the expectation right from the off. And Franny Jeffers couldn't handle it and never recovered from it. I mean, his career is now ever decreasing circles and peters out eventually, to the point that he's become a footnote or a byword for a transfer that went completely wrong. But you can see you can see what they were trying to do. I think it was more a case of them, we want this, and projecting certain qualities onto Francis Jeffers of the striker that they wanted that maybe weren't actually there.
I think you've just nailed it there. That's exactly what I was going to say. It felt like a projection thing to me. I think we've got better at, as fans, as pundits, obviously within clubs as well, we've got better at analysing players. We've got more evidence in terms of how we compare players. But looking back, being compared to Michael Owen or the next Michael Owen, they're not alike. Like, so it's like other than you
scored, from the same part of the country,
young and English, and you scored goals at under whatever it is, like that. That's not a thing. So I think there's quite a lot of projection there, as David said. There's quite a lot of, this could be the next. We know how lazy football clubs can be. This could be the next X, or this could be this. I think there's a little bit of that in there as well, that we need a young English striker or a young British striker in here to complement what we've got. I kind of agree with that, but not let's bring in the next Michael Owen, because he, as you said, fox in the box. He was a predator. Arsenal probably aren't really set up to be able to handle that anyway, on top of all the stuff that David mentioned about pressure, expectation, big club, struggled really badly with injuries the year before, all this sort of stuff. I think just spidey senses would be tingling now for sure, and what's 10 million there would probably be 30-40 million now. And the pressure would be the same, but it's just I think we've just got better at understanding things a bit more in terms of how the world works. Back then it was like, oh yeah, he's from Liverpool as well, wasn't that weird, and he's English and he scored lots of goals. Yeah, next Michael Owen, fine, sorted.
I wonder how much Arsenal, I mean, they came up short, frustrating draws, really silly results, games where they'd lost possession at them but just hadn't scored, maybe just looking for a different way, looking for a different striker, or as David's mentioned, well, I can turn any striker into Thierry Henry, so that's what we'll do here. Who knows? We'll take a break. We'll be back with some quicker hits after this. Welcome back to And It's Live, the history of the Premier League. This is the summer of 2001. Adam, Chelsea, decent, sensible set of business here. Manu Petit coming back to England, which is always nice to see after his sojourn Barcelona. That made perfect sense. William Gallas, I think, this summer. Zenden came in a bit of width, but the big signing from the other side of London, from West Ham, was Frank Lampard. And again, business well done, I think it's probably fair to say.
Probably the last time Chelsea made 4 transfers only in one season, maybe. I'm not sure. They seem to make 4 transfers a day just now. But quality over quantity is all you could really describe here. Even at the time, and even now with the benefit of hindsight, Petit, okay, fair enough, he went away and he's came back. But again, we spoke about Ranieri, and how he is the guy before the guy, or a nice little bridge. I think these signings probably sum that up. You're starting to see them not just thinking about, let's bring in a group of players, but shall we bring in players that can help us become a club? Let's bring in a really flexible defender. Let's bring in a midfielder that can help us control the game. Let's bring in a midfielder that can help create goals, and let's bring in someone on the flank that can help us create goals as well. I think they all made sense, and I think history is probably on the same side as that. So yeah, I think it was a very sensible summer for them, and they're really starting to build these. build these building blocks. Is that a thing? I don't know. But yeah, he's really starting to chip away at the
foundations.
Build the foundations, yeah.
Build the building blocks, well. But yeah, they're really starting to sort of get away from that chaos that we've seen of let's just collect lots of players over the last few years. So yeah, I think it was looking a bit more sensible for sure.
Absolutely. David, Liverpool brought in a left back, a left wing back, and depending how you play him, Jean-Arne Riise. And then not too long into the season, Sander Westerveld cost them, and Gerard Houllier said, enough. Not just one goalkeeper, but two goalkeepers. Thanks. And he brought in Jerzy Dudek and Chris Kirkland. So just two for your cheek. We'll see next week that Liverpool are starting just as they left off. I mean, they are flying at the start of this season. Really look quite a few teams actually at some points of the season that look like they can genuinely win the title. But it's, he's recognised gaps and he's sensibly plugged them.
Yeah, I mean, Jean-Arne Riise was a terrific signing. History has proven that. He was really, really effective. Really, a utility, left-sided utility, but a utility player nonetheless. He had an awful lot to his game, Jean-Arne Riise. And of course, that thunderbolt shot that he had, which is always a very pleasant thing to see, and would be a really good servant to them. The goalkeeping thing was interesting. I understand you want to replace. I think when you sign two, what you're saying is we want to replace and we want you to leave because we don't even want you to be the number two anymore. I think that to me is what it is. I was more excited about Kirkland because at this point we'd been reading a lot in 442 and the papers and talking about this kid that he was a future England goalkeeper. Slightly wary because we'd heard the same thing about Richard Wright as well. But there was a lot of buzz about Kirkland. He was a big guy, 6'3" or something, really athletic. You could see it. Dudek was an interesting one. Liverpool, in my lifetime, have had some of the most eccentric goalkeepers I've seen, and some of the best ones. I mean, I think for a couple of years there, Alisson was the best in the world, for example. But I think that they've always sort of swung between almost these showman goalkeepers and these really, really solid ones. And of course, Dudek's an interesting one because, legendary for the penalty shootout, of course, in Istanbul. But I never had a sense of calm from him when he was in goals, yet he could make some truly... The save from Shevchenko in that final is one of the greatest saves I've ever seen in my life. He had no right whatsoever to be able to get to that. But again, I never quite... and this is a horrible thing to say, and I hate this British mentality of size, but presence maybe straight away didn't quite, he didn't have the stature. And yet, Kirkland did, again, and struggled, with expectations and whatnot. It can be such a curse for a young player, I think, when they're 17, 18, to hear England international, future of the national team, wait till you see this guy, all of that, because you're setting these poor kids totally unrealistic expectations. Put them in the team and say they've got talent, but, we never know. It's down to him. He needs to work hard and develop. Let's leave him to do that. But that never happens. So
I think they're better at that now.
Complain about it.
Do you not think they're better at that now? I guess with obviously the influx of talented young players in England now, it does feel like it's went maybe back the way to pre my generation, where there are players now, I think, within the Premier League that in present day that get a season or two before they're even thought about in terms of England, just because of the quality that they've got here. But back at this time, I completely agree. As soon as somebody appeared, it'd be like, let's get him in the England team. Because
let's get him in the England team.
Yeah, but it seems to have calmed down a little bit. I guess it must just be because literally there's quality coming out of near enough every Premier League club now due to
academy.
Academy.
Yeah, you're probably right. It takes a truly, I think, exceptional talent and at a big club, really. Dauman is a good example, and Goma at Liverpool is a good example. I suspect after a recent performance, Magia at at Villa. We'll start hearing a lot about because he was so good in such a big game. I don't think it's healthy for them. Where they're better, Martin, Adam, you are 100% right. Is clubs are much better at it now. They get their arm around them. They, there's psychological help for them. There's help with banking, how you handle having money all of a sudden. Your family is around you. The club will buy houses for families of young players, and so they're near. So I think they've learned a lot better, but it could be so debilitating because, and again, I speak as somebody with no skin in this game, either for the Premier League or the England team. Even I'm sitting going, oh, can't wait to see this guy. Apparently he's brilliant. He's going to play for England. Yeah. And then when he doesn't, you're automatically going, he's rubbish, because you're not grading on a curve. You're expecting to see something and then you don't. So you immediately dismiss the person. That must be soul crushing. But I think you're right. I think it has improved over the years. And I think they realise now that it isn't literally just about what happens on a pitch for a young player. There's a hell of a lot goes on out with it that will affect that performance on the pitch.
Milan Baris, another incoming transfer that summer, who would be a part of Liverpool going forward. Obviously, one thing I forgot to mention, Adam, you talked about Chelsea's transition from that initial period of some European success, punching higher in the league, to, of course, what's coming a few years down the line. Leboeuf leaves, Gus Poyet leaves, Dennis Wise leaves. They're very much of that kind of Vialli, Hewlett, Hoddle kind of time. Poyet goes to Spurs, along with quite a few older players. Terry Sheringham's going back to Tottenham at this time. Christian Ziga comes from Liverpool, again, pushing on 30 years old. There's a real, I think Casey Keller might be flying around at this time as well. And to replace Sol Campbell, it's Dean Richards for nearly £10 million from Southampton. Who? Goran Bunjevic from Red Star. Yeah. So it didn't quite go well, and Glenn Hoddle's going to have quite a few problems at Tottenham. Who else to talk about before we wrap up and get ready for the new season? Leeds are quietish for their own standards, Adam. Later on in the season, they are going to make another big signing, and it's a signing that probably is very telling and is kind of often cited as the absolute ultimate act of hubris. That's Seth Johnson from Derby. The way that transfer was handled and the jump that they made, we'll get to it in due course over the coming couple of episodes. But they're losing their shit as a club around this time, and the wheels very much kind of coming off. But credit to them for staying the whole summer without going absolutely mental.
Yeah. No, fair enough. I think it's again, you look at it and you think, okay, did they need much really in terms of what's there? It's this is why I find transfers and squad building and all that sort of stuff so fascinating, because how do you know when the right time is to stick or twist? It's such a difficult art. Again, sorry to come back to modern days again, but you look at Arsenal this summer and you're thinking some sensible moves. Like this is what, to go back to the Man United comparison, this is what you would imagine the club at the top of the pile to do. We are trading out our squad players for proper first team players. Therefore, we are upgrading the whole squad. We're getting ourselves to a bigger level. What is that modern term? I can never really understand. Raising the floor of the squad and hopefully raising the ceiling with some of the other signings, potential wise. But it just doesn't always work that way. There's no surefire thing. So I'm looking through that Leeds lineup and thinking, yeah, okay, they've brought in some players that were all young and they're playing together. They can only get better. They've got a manager that I thought was doing very, very well. They've got a bit of firepower in there. Viduka had a really good spell last season. They can go and kick on. Do they need much? And I think particularly nowadays in the the desire for just more signings, more new signings. I think these type of summers probably don't happen, but I do think some clubs need to just take a look and say, actually, we're okay. It's not as if we're stagnating. It's not as if we're hanging on to older players whose contracts are running down that we're hoping to get a turnout of, or where recruitment isn't great, that we're not we're too scared to change. They've evolved quite well, so I kind of don't blame them for just sort of sticking. But obviously, as we see, things will take a turn, and they will very much twist more than they should. But in this window, I'm thinking, okay, you've finished fourth, you got the Champions League semi-finals, and like there is an element sometimes I think let's just maybe a season of calm will allow us to be a bit better. But so it's fascinating. It shows there's no right and wrong way to do anything transfer wise, because each of the clubs we've spoken about here have pretty much done things that look sensible and it will be varying degrees of success for them all. So that's why I find it so intriguing.
As is always the case. Thomas Repka and who else did West Ham? Don Hutchison, a couple of clever signings for West Ham. Gareth Southgate made the move from Villa to Borough. That would ultimately be quite a good stabilising effect for them. They also had a change of manager. The kind of Terry Venables, Brian Robson era was ushered to an end, and Steve McLaren got his opportunity to step up from being a very respected number 2 and coach to being a manager, and some sensible things happening there, because they're going to have a decent spell of it over the next few years, it must be said. And staying in the Northeast, and again, it's probably one of the most accomplished Newcastle sides that we'll see probably in Premier League era. Young Craig Bellamy going from Coventry to Newcastle, and a player with a left foot so filthy that it could have its own OnlyFans account. Laurent Robert, Davey, this I liked a Laurent Robert free kick, I must say, and they're just going to add to what Bobby Robson is definitely doing at Newcastle at the minute. They're decent.
Oh, I was really excited about Laurent Robert. First of all, one of the most glamorous monikers that we've seen in the Premier League. I mean, this guy, he could be a model. He could run for France. He could be a movie star with a name like that. All of these. I mean, he sounds classic cinema, doesn't he? And my goodness, you're right. There is something I think about left-footed players who have that degree of skill. There's a vitality to them and a lovely balance. But I was excited for them for Bellamy. I thought, wow, that's real pace going into your side. And they had a couple of youngsters who were coming through who were quick as well. And they looked like, that they had Newcastle looked like they had a plan. They looked like the signings were being bought to do certain things the manager wanted. I think that's always something that you can tell from the outside when you as a fan, and as I say, a non-expert, can look at it and think, I actually see how these jigsaw pieces fit together. I get what it's supposed to look like. Doesn't always mean it will, but I think that's a good sign anyway. And I think under Robson that they had regained their likability a little bit after the rather dank and dark era of the late 90s for them, in which a lot of because in the mid 90s it's easy to forget. I hope that we've maybe made people remember how popular Newcastle were with neutrals with non-Newcastle fans, and they sort of lost it. The Dalglish era, I think, is best summed up by the word scowl. That's certainly what I think of when I think of the Dalglish era. The Hula era just looked like everything was off the rails. Whereas under Bobby Robson, who's of course, so adored by this stage of his career and loved and impossible not to root. I think he's impossible not to root for. But these were clever signings that looked part of it. They were young as well. That's another thing to remember. And there was a vibrancy and a freshness to Newcastle that I think had been lacking. They've gone from an era where they're signing, with all due respect, they're bringing in players like John Barnes and Ian Rush and Stuart Pearce, to bringing together these guys, these young, exciting players. And I think it really did bring the freshness back to that club. And as you say, they're set for a reasonable period.
Just sensible for me. Just set the conversations we had last season about Newcastle, where it was obviously trending in the right direction. They really missed Shearer. I was pretty pleased to see them not just go out and bring in another centre forward this summer and be like, okay, well, Shearer's fit now and then this person doesn't play. They instead thought about it in a more logical way. What do we have? We've got someone who will guarantee you 20 goals a season if you do the right things around them. Okay, let's give him legs and Bellamy to accompany him and someone who can play off of him. Let's give him someone on the wing who can create for him, and we'll deal with that. We didn't score a lot of goals last year. I think it was 40 something they scored in the league the year before. They added 30 they added 30 or they're going to add 30 this year. So that brings up the level and it makes sense. Jermaine Genius, really, really highly rated. Bring him in as a younger English signing, and then we probably want a bit more at the back. So we'll bring in Robbie Elliott, solid squad player, and Distan, who can come in and be a very good signing for them. So again, it's just sensible. It's just what do we need and what have we got, and just trying to plug it together. I don't think I would have quite seen them get as far up the table as they did, if I'm being honest. But it just goes to show what a couple of sensible signings and filling those gaps can do.
It's funny though, if you told me that looking at that Newcastle team that baby-faced Jermaine Genius was a future BBC television presenter only to have to resign in scandal, I would have thought we'd gone through the looking glass. And maybe in the 21st century we have a little bit. There's a lot of things, if you told me about 2025, 26, I might have balked at. But he was a really good player at this point. And again, I go back to that point. There was a youth and a vibrancy and an excitement to Newcastle that was badly needed, that I don't think Bobby Robson gets enough credit for, because I think people forget how bad it was at Newcastle, the mood round the play. Whenever I think of Newcastle 94-95, it's excitement, it's goals, it's, even with the way it ended. When I think of Newcastle 98-99, that maybe it's the stormy weather of the defeat by Sunderland, but that's the image that I conjure up when I think about it. And he changes that. He brings back sunshine.
A lot of hope and positivity around Loa, for example, is maybe life after Shearer, perhaps, or something a bit different. The three newbies before we finish up: Bolton Wanderers and Sam Allardyce are in the Premier League. So it's the big Sam era, and Kevin Nolan will be all over that. Graham Souness returns with Blackburn Rovers. I think many thought that Blackburn might be consigned to the Football League for forevermore, but all three of these teams actually are going to be here for quite a wee while. This will be the first season actually that all three of the promoted clubs stay in the Premier League. The other one was a lot of excitement about. Adam, was Fulham, managed by Jean Tigana, who came in after Kevin Keegan, obviously. We're going to see the excitement of Luis Saha, for example, very quickly, the opening day of the season, if memory serves. But also, talking about goalkeepers a fair bit in this show, Edwin van der Sar turns up at Fulham. I think it's been hinted at before, or talked about maybe in the main event, with the trouble that Sir Alex Ferguson's going to have with Barthez this season, blah, blah, blah. Surely he could have done better than Fulham. It is easy to forget how much in the pit of despair in terms of confidence Edwin van der Sar was at the end of that Juventus time. Scared of his own shadow. This is a rebirth, and it comes at a very welcoming place, a very supportive club, and very much a club on the move.
100%. I don't think anything sums up the first decade of the Premier League than a club like Fulham being in the Championship and coming up, because it would be absolutely unheard of 5 years before this. Lots of money, and again we're starting to see this billionaire owner context that will be the biggest story of the next decade. But we're starting to see it coming in here. Some really, really good signings here. We look at some of these signings now and you think they wouldn't look out of place for in modern days for a club like, say, when Nottingham Forest come up and splashed all that money, and everybody was like, "Wow, what is going on here? This is insane." This is probably more surprising than that, I think, at the time, for sure. And they're probably bringing in comparatively higher quality of the time. So it was fascinating watching this. It was like Football Manager gone live. It genuinely was. You're sitting watching, you're thinking, this is mad. Obviously, they have all that money, as we mentioned. They've got the London factor as well. They can attract all those players.
Nicest bit of London factor.
The nicest bit of
London at that. Yeah.
And they've got the manager as well, who is star power as well. So he's someone that people will sit up and take notice of, and they get that buy-in. So yeah, it's funny because you've got Fulham and you've got Bolton, who almost come up as the anti-Fulham. And I think, again, to come back to that modern context, a club like Bolton now would probably be aligned to maybe like a Brentford, as we said before, and probably would be more highly thought of than a Fulham coming up, because you think, oh, they're modern, they've got this analytics, they use Prozone, they've got all of this stuff, they're doing things on a budget. But at the time, it was all about Fulham for me out of the two, because I was completely transfixed by billionaires coming in and bringing in this amazing manager and all these players. It was really exciting for them, and I think you're spot on about Van der Sar. Everyone sort of forgets that move was horrendous for him. I still, obviously nowadays, again, you'd think, oh, he could probably go somewhere else, but I think at this point, he's made a risky move, I think, to come in and be a goalkeeper at a club that you're still expecting to be
busy at the back.
Yeah, you're still expecting them to be at the lower end. I can't remember how I've thought about them in terms of where they would finish, but I didn't expect them to be coming in and challenging for Europe or anything like that. So from going from what he was used to at Ajax and Juventus to here, it is a bit of a jump. And to be fair to him, it absolutely works out for him in the end, because of how well he does here, how much he rebuilds his career, and what he goes on to do. But yeah, those two, Bolton and Fulham, are fascinating to compare this year.
Yeah, Sam Allardyce fascinates me. I mean, he's just the absolute collision of the culture war in football, isn't he? He's your dad and Steve Jobs just smashed together.
Yeah.
With a pint of wine and all the best kind of stats available to him. Charity Shield was under the roof, I think, at Cardiff. Liverpool, again, as I said, just picking up where they left off, beat Manchester United 2-1, early penalty, and then a Michael Owen goal. I think Danny Murphy was pretty good in this game, and he will just have the absolute beating of Manchester United, as we will see again. Another one whose post-career vibe really detracts from just how good a footballer Danny Murphy was around this time, and just pitching up at big moments as well. Plenty to get into. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Cheers, Davey.
He did give us the Bob the Cat story, so
he did.
There is that.
Beautifully was Peter Ustinov there, in his prime, delivering that.
One day by the Nile.
That tragic tale. There's a lot in this season, guys, and it's far more open than I remember, with a few clubs at various points genuinely with a shout of the title, and big hopes for the whole pyramid of English football, because ITV Digital has poured a lot of money into the Football League. What could possibly go wrong there? We'll kick off the season properly next week. Until then, bye for now.